Om Apiyantu Mamangani Vak Pranaschakshuhu Shrotra Matra Balamindriyani Chasarvani Sarvam Brahma Upanishadam Mahabrahma Nirakuryam Mama Brahma Nirakarora Nirakaranamastva Nirakaranam Meastu Tadatmani Nirateya Upanishatsu Dharmaste Mai Shantu Te Mai Shantu Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. May our bodies experience great health. May our actions all be dharmic. May our life force flow unimpeded. And may our minds expand in their capacity to know Brahman. For the Upanishads of Vedanta state that all existence is Brahman. Therefore, may we never deny Brahman, and may Brahman never deny us. May there be no rejection of Brahman ever by us, we who are dedicated to the realization of the Atman in all. May all the divine qualities cited in those Upanishads then also abide among us. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karbhavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. May Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the teachings, or with the world. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Now everything has become still, quiet, unmoving, as we sit for the Dharma, as we just chanted about. May all our actions be dharmic, a word that is fairly difficult to define in English. We used to use back in the 50s and 60s when we were first hearing about the Dharma, when we were in our late teens and early 20s, that it meant righteousness. And that didn't satisfy us because there's a little bit of a loaded nature to the word righteousness in America and the West and Christendom and so forth, like being superior than thou kind of connotation to it. So we began to think that Dharma really lent to us the idea of right action, and that's actually a good short introduction to my class today, and its title called Karma as Yoga. We could have called it Karma Yoga or Karma Yoga as Yoga, but Karma as Yoga is the idea, and there's a slight distinction there because you might say that of the four great yogas, which I will show you in Krishna's rendering way back thousands of years ago, and in Swami Vivekananda's recent rendering last century, or a century before last now, in the late 1800s, these four yogas were highlighted, or are highlighted. Swamiji even being so bold as to say this is rather the religion of the day now, the new religion. It is this idea of bringing together inaction with action and wisdom with devotion. Two pairs that are very difficult to bring together. Actually shouldn't be difficult at all, but because of philosophy and debate and the passage of time in these various darshanas, people began to think that they were at odds with one another. So that can be talked about more in length, but back to close to the point here is that in the world today, really, there's very little of three of the yogas going on. There are very few people that meditate, and maybe even have a teacher that's guided them to instruct them in meditation on specific things, especially among the non-monastic, which is a basic greater percentage of humanity. So meditation is very rare, and so is Jnana, the study of scriptures. I know this because of talking to president of Advaita ashrama and other arms of scriptural wisdom that are being put out by the Ramakrishna order in many different languages. We haven't seen anything like this in the world. The closest to it was back in Shankara's time, when scriptures were being commented on and made more popular, but only in India, and basically more, again, amongst the monastics than the householders. So that puts Jnana Yoga or scripture kind of at an odds, and not very popular, as the president told me. The books aren't selling very much, and people aren't sitting under trees and quiet near a brook or a stream like Krishna advises in the Gita, and reading it and then contemplating it. They might go to a teacher and hear a little bit and go away thinking they understood it, but we know the word is loaded because we just had a retreat on the word, Om, A-U-M, with the Shara, and everything that it implied that we could possibly cram into a 3.5-day retreat with 6 hours of teachings each day and satsang at night with questions about the word. That was last weekend we did that, which is why we weren't live streaming with all of you. Welcome to the live streaming audience. And so that puts meditation, Dhyan Yoga, or you could call it Raja Yoga, because Raja Yoga is 8-limbed. And the father, Patanjali, is the, affectionately speaking, we call him the father of yoga, although yoga is very ancient and probably had many fathers, but fathers like him might have been some of the incarnations of teachers of yoga in the past. Because we know Govindapada was Shankara's teacher, and he was the 500 years before that, he was Patanjali incarnate. So those two yogas then, a little bit you hear about them, most among the monastics, and some interested householders, and we call them forest dwellers, people who kind of are on the fringe of things, and not interested just in making money and having families and being successful at work and so forth. And a third yoga then would be this yoga of bhakti or devotion. You could say that it's a little bit more pronounced particularly in the Western religions, Westernized religions. And in India, bhakti yoga, according to Vivekananda, has also become a little bit off track. You see, maybe just dancing and singing was kind of the extent of it. But there's a lot more to bhakti yoga than that. And so we know that a great cross-section of humanity is not particularly attracted to God with form. You could say maybe any more, because of the failings of religion and the downside of taking a savior, how it narrows out the field. You have to have only that savior, for instance, and have to give your life to that savior and none else, kind of thing. It becomes a very kind of fundamentalist leaning that a lot of people don't like, and so we're talking about the difference between the Protestants and the Catholics on the ride over here, and how the Protestants really trimmed a lot of that ritualism out of the religion. And so if you wanted to worship a savior with ritual and so forth, you would have to go to Catholicism. So bhakti, is a question mark in this age. We know even the bhakti that came over recently from India, that are kind of a fundamentalist worshippers of Krishna, also leave everything out, including everything in India, out of the picture just for the sake of that one savior or avatar. So it really doesn't appeal to a lot of people, even some of the religious people, what to speak of the non-religious people, the atheists and agnostics and so forth. So this leaves one yoga left, and the point I'm trying to make here, karma yoga. So when I say karma as yoga, I'm saying that since we're all doing action, and there is a certain yoga of action called karma yoga, and there are bullet points to it and definitions of it, particularly in the Gita from Sri Krishna, and brought forward now by Swami Vivekananda, who says that maybe karma yoga might, whereas it used to be the least important, might now be actually the most important. this all could be because of the fact that everyone is doing action. And there's even an attraction to action to the exclusion of everything else because of what you can get from it in this world. So it becomes a kind of easy path to follow, in the sense that you don't have to mingle it with anything else, you see, just to do it. You can just go to work 9 to 5, or what is it now, 24/7, and work and work and work. Duty has become the burning sun that is burning away at the vitals of humanity. Sort of a paraphrase of Swami Vivekananda, saying how this yoga of action, if it's not focused and dedicated based on the precepts of karma yoga, can become a real drudgery, and has become a real drudgery to people. So, long way of saying that when I say karma as yoga, is that we should start working and turn our karma, our actions, into yoga. We had beautiful sayings around this from Swami Vivekananda when he came here. He would say things like, to people who thought that God was the agent, you see, oh, God is working in my life, he'd say, God's not in the world though, so how can he be working in your life? He's not in the world. And then they would hear this from authority and start to get their ideas smashed, you see. And then he'd say, but the world is in God. And so he would do mind transforming little quips like that would start to make people think philosophically correctly or dharmically correctly. Just a little bit of a change, and that's the Jnana yoga we're talking about, just a little bit of a change of the adjustment of your mind's thinking process, not necessarily your emotions or your attitude, that can come through other ways, but your thinking process will get rid of what the father of yoga called Bhranti Darshana, deluded thinking, which if it's there at the beginning, then exacerbates over time, and you come up with all sorts of strange ideas, like eternal hellfire and things like that. I was listening to a broadcast by our founder, Lexixian, yesterday, who at that time was known as Sheikh Nur al-Jarahi. He's a sheikh of the order of Jarahi of Istanbul, and he was talking about Islam and the idea of hellfire that has come through all the way from Abraham through Moses to Jesus, and they're all the way up to Muhammad. This idea of eternal hellfires, and it was a beautiful dialogue going on between the student and his guide. And so he's one of the faithful. He finds his way. He falls asleep or he dies, and he finds his way to paradise. And for the Muslim, that's all gardens. It's just beautiful gardens with millions of souls talking about what we would call the Dharma there. That's paradise in Islam. And it's an eternal place. It's sort of like the Tripura, the second city of Tripura to the Hindus. So they're talking about that, and he wonders why he's so fortunate to have made it to paradise, you see. So the guide tells him, the loving guide, Islamic guide tells him, welcome to paradise, you're here, you've arrived. And so he starts thinking, well, why wasn't I sent to hell, like eternal hellfires? And the guide says, well, those don't exist. There's no such thing, because God is all compassionate. Allah is all compassionate. So there's no such thing as eternal hellfires. And so to hear this from the guide really impresses him, but he still has doubts, you see, because he's heard this all his life about eternal hellfires. And so he continues to question further about it, and about eternal hellfires. And he said, well, don't some people go there? And finally, to sort of as a concession, the Islamic guide tells him basically, oh, you mean there are some people who, they don't live faithfully on earth in the body. They don't worship God. They don't know anything about God, or aren't cautious of God. So when they pass away, they dream hellfire. They dream about hellfire. And this dream is not real, and it's not also eternal either, because Allah won't allow any soul to suffer. So it's a dream of hellfire they're having, and they wake up from it, and it's just like any dream, it's gone when you wake up from it. And so this finally satisfies the soul, you see, that there is really no such thing as eternal hellfire. So anyway, back to my point is the ideas like that get taken away by this jnanam, this knowledge that you are able to take into your mind. And so that's one of the beautiful elements of jnana yoga. But as I'm saying, not that many people avail themselves of dharmic wisdom, higher truth it's called, which is a porthole or a doorway into non-dual reality, which would be called Allah or Almighty Father or Brahman in our tradition and so forth. Tathagata Garbha, the very mass of pure conscious awareness in Buddhism. So karma as yoga then means if we were to all of a sudden wake up and dedicate ourselves to the points of karma yoga, and that every act all of a sudden we would be able to change it to karma yoga and not just karma, then number one, our karmas would be neutralized, and number two, we would satisfy all of our desires and our duties in the world. One student reminded me recently, because they were reading in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and a question was asked, can we realize God without renouncing the world fully? And Sri Ramakrishna surprisingly said, well, yes, of course you can. It's funny because he has all these 16 disciples who are fully renounced, and he himself is fully renounced. You'd think he would say, oh, you must renounce the world completely to get to God realization. But instead he says, no, you're a householder. You're perfect the way you are. You're following the Dharma. You're following the middle path. That's a great way. You don't have to change anything. You just have to hold on to God. And you too can realize God. So basically it was, his further teaching was hold on to God with one hand and hold on to the world with the other. And at a certain time, when you satisfy this Dharma, you'll be able to let go of work. God will take work away from you, as it were, and you'll be able to hold on to God with both hands. Fully renounced, your duty's all done, your Dharma satisfied. It sounds sort of like the way you want to end your life when you're a Hindu. You see, as a forest dweller, you've retired from everything. There's no such thing here, in a sense, for most people. Their retirement just means embracing more of the world of pleasure. See, it's not like, oh, I'm giving up all things so I can spend all my time with the Lord now, and inside of myself, meditating and so forth. So this advice to the householder really enthused him. I was also transcribing recently a lecture of Swami Vivekananda Maharaj, my guru, peace and bliss be upon him. And in that lecture, he was saying how he went to see Swami Turiyananda, one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, in Benares when he was a young man. So he would go to the Vishwanath temple every day and offer Ganges water to Shiva. And this was when he was a brahmacharya, not yet a Swami. And so he said, I didn't just go to Varanasi or Benares to see Shiva. Swami Turiyananda was there. So we know that our teacher, our beloved teacher, Swami Vivekananda, saw and talked to Swami Brahmananda, Swami Shardananda, Swami Turiyananda, and one or two of the other direct disciples of Ramakrishna. We're very fortunate to have that kind of communion. So he said he went to see Swami Turiyananda, and by hearing Swami Turiyananda talk to him there in Benares, when the Swami was still in Navadi, he said it completely convinced me to give up the world 100%. So I went from brahmacharya to be a monastic and took my sannyas as a Swami. And the Swami told him, don't rely upon anyone, not even me. Be a lamp unto yourself, make your own decisions, and follow your own course with 100% assurance. And he said, just totally enthused him about completely renouncing the world. So you have these two walks of life, and both of them are infused with karma, with action. Karma just really means, the most basic definition is just action. Again, like the word we were talking about that's got kind of a loaded connotation to it, righteousness, so does that word have a little bit of a loaded nature. You see, you'd think that, and as does the word renunciation to many Westerners. So you'd want to think of those words in a deeper way. according to your station of life at the right place and the right time. So since everyone is doing action every day, then my conclusion here in this little preamble to the actual Dharma teachings we're going to get into is we should transform it into an offering to the divine. And also, as we do that, it will be a teaching to ourselves, because Swami Vivekananda has told us that the only purpose for action is to gain knowledge. That's a direct statement from him. The only purpose for action is to gain knowledge. So all these other purposes people are seeking, like fame and name and money and pleasures and fulfilling desires, are really not going to be a true path to follow, because they're going to keep changing, keep coming back at you in different forms through many lifetimes, they're saying. So the minute that you make all work an offering to God in humanity, and probably Swami Vivekananda would say, don't make it an offering to humanity. So there's a little distinction there that you have to understand. If you serve the ego, then the ego gets bloated. So if you're serving humanity, both their ego and your ego is at risk. You see, oh, I have served them, they have been served by me, or whatever the case may be. But I just said, Swami Turananda told Swami Sheshananda, don't depend on anyone. You depend only on yourself. So to make an offering to the ego in human beings was not karma yoga. You make an offering to the Lord who exists in all human beings. Then that Lord really is the great self, the Atman. And that realization of the Atman is the purpose of all four of these yogas, whether they're taken individually or together. Maybe we can look at that to make more sense out of it as we look at this class called Karma as Yoga. That is, action as Atman. Again, Swamiji, when he came here, used the terms work as worship. He used the term labor as love. And you could say effort as essence. That's one that I'm adding in. Effort as essence, see. Action as Atman, that kind of thing. So these all help us understand in just a Mahavakya style, just a few words, that what we need to do with work is to deify it and offer it to anything other than the ego. And then the ego will abandon the throne that it's taking up in your heart, and because it's an usurper there. The idea of individuality. We'll look at that with a few of these charts from Lord Kapila and from Sri Krishna about the 5 kinds of intellect and the 3 types of minds in action and so forth. Those are charts that have just been recently colorized and that we haven't seen for years and years. But I'm starting out with these charts because we're a little more familiar with them, and particularly these to give us an idea of how karma yoga exists in a field of jnana, of devotion, that is wisdom, devotion, and meditation all around it. If you took these 4 in a line, you pulled karma forward and put these other 3 behind it, then you would be working on to become a karma yogi or a karma yogini. I've seen people who didn't even know what karma yoga was who were karma yogis and karma yoginis. They just had the natural idea of selfless service to others. And it wasn't necessarily religious or yogic or even with the idea of a future enlightenment in view for me. So any kind of reason to be doing it except just for the sake of serving beings. And you'll probably learn that if you serve beings and they take it to the ego, then you'll be careful of how you practice karma yoga from then on. You'll learn those lessons even without a teacher. So labor as love, work as worship. In that sense, you could see how Sri Krishna put in a setting of the 4 yogas at a very early time. He called it Chaturdasya, the 4 yogas. And I've looked and searched, and I've seen great teachers speak of one yoga, sometimes maybe two yogas, or they'll take a different position of the four yogas, individual from one another. But these are the two bookends, as far as I can tell, in Hindu philosophy, Krishna and Swami Vivekananda, who have brought it forth as an integral whole. They're thinking of it, four yogas, as really being one, and intrinsically one, not something that you bring together. That's going to happen when you're a practitioner. But if you've outstripped the practitioner phase and you're a past master, then you come into the body with this idea of all these four yogas really as being one, just like everything else is, one Brahman. And at that point, you'll probably be teaching the yoga of action and inaction, and that's also a teaching from Krishna, and it also has to do a lot with the chart we'll look at soon here, called the two wings of a bird, where action and inaction are put side by side. So for a person of that elevated consciousness, we were talking about it at breakfast this morning, a person with that elevated consciousness would sort of be courting the line between acting and not acting. And Sri Krishna has a teaching about that, which we will get to soon. The three dynamics of three dynamics of yoga. That is vikarma, karma, and akarma. He talks about vikarma is forbidden action, and that would be against the laws of karma yoga. And karma would be just acting with self-motivation. And there's a problem to that, as we've seen. The ego is in the way, and the fruits are not pure. But then there's this way he talks about it. This is Sri Krishna in the Gita, that there's also akarma, no karma at all, not acting. And we find out that when we find people like that, like I found my teacher, Swami Vivekananda Maharaj, that was what they had mastered. They were moving about in the body, and they were giving talks, and they were worshipping at the altar, and they were asked to give guest talks at other places, and they were moving from center to center and doing a life like everyone else, with motion, with action, karma, but they weren't doing anything. They were neither accruing any new karma, nor were they working out any old karma. So they had arrived at this neutral place, neutralized karma. You could say everyone else who's a serious practitioner is trying to attain attenuated karma. Well, let's see if I can get in there and twist the pot a little bit, you see, like a mechanic would do to a carburetor, you see, or a sound engineer would do to a machine in order to balance it out. Let's take that pot, little tiny screwdriver, and just even everything out. It'd be nice if we could do that, if we had a sort of psychic screwdriver to stick into our intellect and twist the screw in there just to balance everything out perfectly, because it had gotten unbalanced while we were trying to work. And we weren't doing all that work as worship. We weren't laboring in love. And that action we were doing was turning into karmic repercussions. So these great souls, we'll get to this teaching a little bit more, are really masters of akarma. No action whatsoever, yet they're still going about doing things like everyone else. So on the outside, you're not going to see how masterful they are. And they say this is why the teachings of Krishna and Ram and Jesus and Buddha in India, they say that's why their work has lasted so long, and everyone else's work's been forgotten. You've got a few famous people, and usually these famous people are kind of infamous people. They're very good vikarma yogis. They've done a kind of acts of good stupefaction or acts of bad stupefaction, and it's followed them through a series of lifetimes, and they become very famous for it. Like conquering countries. There's a lot of karma involved in that, yet they're famous, as great conquerors. So how is this? How can this compare whatsoever to a soul who's karmaless, you see, but whose work still lasts even longer than theirs? For thousands of years, they're remembered for what they did, what they seem to do anyway. So if we looked at Sri Krishna's teaching as we begin to flesh this out, we see here that the first quote is, "The four main yogas cited in the Bhagavad Gita guide the soul in its inward flight. Bhakti is one wing, Jnana is the other. Karma yoga is the body of the bird, and Buddhi yoga is its tail feathers. The crucial flight occurs in and leads to the Atman." So this, no matter what kind of practice you're doing, it's all done inside the great mind, and the great mind is intrinsically aware of innate perfection of the Atman, and that everything is dissolving back into it. You could call it the Word if you want, because all the students here today who have come to this class were at the retreat about the Word last weekend. So Gaudapada's first sloka in the Mandukya Upanishad, everything that you experience here, everything you see, taste, touch, hear, and smell, this is just the Atman. Everything that you don't see here and you don't touch, everything that's subtle, also is just Om. You see? So it's all Om. And all the meditations that you take to dissolve the mind stream with all its karmas in it really dissolves everything back into Om, and then you find the Om humming inside of yourself or in your Atman. So everything gets dissolved in that way. So Bhakti is one wing, that's devotion. Jnana is the other wing, that's wisdom. So these two wings, a bird can't fly without both devotion and wisdom. So those who are arguing that the path of Bhakti is the only way to go haven't got it complete yet. And those who are arguing that Jnana is the only way to go, they're an incomplete view too. So you'd have to have two wings to get off the ground, my teacher used to say. So if you don't have, if you have just Bhakti and no Jnanam, Vivekananda would say, then this Bhakti gets unchecked by Jnanam, so it begins to become too wet, you see. It begins to become too dualistic, too fundamentalistic. It forgets the non-dual behind it. On the other hand, if you take to just Jnanam and without Bhakti, then Jnanam becomes too dry, too intellectual. And it's not checked by Bhakti, you see. So it's sort of like checking mind, third eye, with heart. The Anahata means Om, the heart center. And bringing these two together. So at least those two are a very profound synthesis of yoga. They're an integral yoga. They're a purna yoga. But we'll read some of these quotes that have to do with that from Swamiji. He thinks that people who have just one or two yogas are one-sided. He says, my ideal student of the future, the Vedanta practitioner, will have all four yogas. They'll be masters of all four, and they'll be integrating them because they are innately one, as we were saying. Now, so Bhakti is one wing, Jnana is the other. Karma is the body of the bird. And then the meditation is the tail feathers. Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi used to talk that way. She said, meditation is the rudder of your boat. If the rudder's not there, then the boat can't be guided. So by meditating every day, you guide yourself through these waters of existence that are fraught with tides and whirlpools and winds and eddies and so forth. If you don't man that rudder with meditation every day, then you can get off course in your spiritual life. So this is a quote about integral yoga or purna yoga. Sometimes they call it synthesis of yoga, or about Chaturdasha yoga. Let's see what Krishna says in the Gita about these. Bhakti yoga, that one wing of the bird, he says, becoming Brahman, serene-minded, that one never grieves nor desires. The same to all beings, he obtains supreme devotion to me. By devotion he knows the truth, what and who I am, and having known, forthwith enters into me. So it would be very much in keeping with Sri Ramakrishna's statement that bhakti is the path for the sage. Most people can come easily and without a lot of mind power, a lot of intellectual prowess, or philosophical acumen. They can come quickly to salvation, to the Lord, through this devotion to God with form. Let's see across the page what Jnana Yoga proposes. Sri Krishna says, of pure intellect, abiding in the self, restraining the senses, free of attachment and aversion, dwelling in solitude, eating sparsely, subduing body, mind, and speech, engaging in meditation, full of dispassion, free of the sense of I, me, and mine, established in peace, abandoning ego, violence, arrogance, desire, enmity, and property, those souls come to me. So the Jnani and the Bhakta both have these paths by which they are assured of their, I'd use the word salvation. I think liberation is a higher cut of things. And maybe for that we need to go then to look at this third yoga, Buddhi Yoga. Now that's the same really as Jnana Yoga here. Krishna called it Buddhi Yoga. It's the yoga of the intellect, basically. He says about it, mentally resigning deeds unto me, having me as the highest goal, and resorting to Buddhi Yoga, which is the yoga of concentration. Do thou ever fix thy mind upon me alone. So another place in the Gita says, if they practice the yoga of, if they practice devotions to me, I give them the discrimination by which they can come to me. So Sri Krishna, who oftentimes is explained as, or sometimes blamed for, standing only for the yoga of devotion, has very powerful teachings in the Gita about both meditation and jnana. Discrimination would be one of the tools of jnana. Viveka, it's called. So he had Swami Vivekananda, took that as his name. You see. So that's three of the yogas. So you'd say resorting to Buddhi Yoga, which is concentration of mind. So you can see how putting together these yogas would be an incomparable path and would easily disperse all problems or obstacles in the way. So the devotee or practitioner would be thinking this way. I have 4 kinds of temperaments in me. I have a devotional leaning, I have a contemplative leaning, I have a studious leaning, and I certainly have an active leaning in this day and age. So I'm supposed to take all 4 of these and bring them into focus like 4 facets of one jewel. And then maybe I could look through the lens into each of these facets and see which one has a distortion or an imperfection, or which one I'm lacking in, or which 2 I'm lacking in. And so this would be this new religion of the age, to make yourself 4-sided, not just 1-sided or even 2-sided. So this is going to be possible by doing your work as worship. Right there, what are you saying? Well, I've just put karma and bhakti together, you see. So you make a good start by getting karma yoga moving along the correct trajectory, and so that it brings you knowledge. That would be putting action and wisdom together. And then you use the rudder of your boat, you see, to meditate each day on the effects. And so this is going to give you the detachment, even the witness consciousness, to see the tumblers in the lock falling into place. You're actually seeing the maturation of what they call Purna Yoga in India falling into place where it should have always been, because somehow it got displaced amongst your many lives and amongst your many actions. Let's then get to the 4th yoga, which is the subject of our talk. Karma yoga is action. He said in the Gita, this is Sri Krishna again, doing continually all actions in me, taking refuge in me, by my grace he reaches the eternal, undying abode. It would be sort of like that paradise that we just talked about in the Muslim religion, you see, in Islam. To go to paradise would be this eternal, undying abode. And the Krishna there would appear to people as Muhammad, you see. And those beings having that penchant for their devotion going towards that ishtam, that ideal, and their practice on earth being done under that auspice, and their teachers being sheikhs and so forth, instead of swamis or rinpoches. So this is the universal way of thinking. So one of the benefits of starting out doing all work as worship would be that it's going to culminate eventually into this synthesis of yoga. You have to make a start somewhere. There's my point. We're all doing action. Let's make it conscious action. But a couple of these prominent and popular Buddhists on the scene nowadays have been coining phrases like Swamiji did, work as worship. They've been calling it mindful action or mindfulness kind of thing. So that just means that instead of blundering about, as Swami Vivekananda said in our retreat last weekend in one of his quotes, there's just nothing worthwhile about this all blundering about the universe. You're just bumping into things. You're bumping into other people. You're bumping into the stove with the lid open. You're running into the refrigerator door. You're bumping your toe on the bedstead. You're getting in fights and getting punched. All this knocking about the universe is just a kind of action that's just leading to repercussions, see, and pain and suffering. And so you try and do it as pleasure. You see, oh, maybe I'll try and come together with food and entering my mouth and getting pleasure from it. Any other kinds of contact. But Krishna is saying in the Gita, all those acts of the senses are abodes of pain. Yeah, they are the abodes of pain. So to give up both good and bad, or both the ideal of transcendence, would be to realize this and go for what is transcendent. Like in that transcription from my teacher last week that I was writing down his talk in 1986 to the Vedantists in Portland. So I was transcribing along there as I listened to him on a cassette, of all things, and because the CDs had given out. Let's hear it for analog over digital. So I was listening to the cassettes, and he was just like right there in the room, 1986 cassette. And so he was saying on there about this ideal of karma yoga and how people need to take to it. And so these are very powerful teachings coming from beings who are even monastic, who have mastered this idea of good and evil. So he was saying in that talk, never teach your children to have fun. And you could hear this pin drop silence of the 30 or 40 people that were in his congregation sitting back there waiting for his next words. Never teach your children to have fun. Teach them to renounce. And of course that's, you said, it's coming from a monk, so that's going to be a very high order, tall order to do that. But he was saying because the path of the Bhogamarga, the path of enjoyment, leads to rebirth and again and again in the human form. And it never gets you beyond good and evil. So what you want is transcendence of good and evil. Now, Jnana Yoga will give you that in spades. Meditation will help you see it, that you have it from a witness standpoint. You say, oh, I see now. I took up the sword of viveka, discrimination, and I cut all my ignorance away, and I cut dualities in twain, and I arrived at this witness consciousness where I can meditate on God alone. So now actually I love God more than I love the world, whereas before I loved the world so much and God went away. And Sri Ramakrishna used to say that. The further you go toward the east, the farther away you go from the west. Similarly, he said, the further you go towards God, the farther you go away from the world. So the idea that the world is a separate reality leaves the mind of the Vedantist and the mature Buddhist practitioner and mature Muslim and so forth, who are seeking a higher transcendent position. So dualities warned about by Sri Krishna in the Gita play into this whole chart, as you can see. He says here at the end of this chart, and then we'll move quickly on to a more modern rendering of it. Thus has wisdom more profound than all other profundities been declared to you by me. So the 4 yogas, Chaturdasha Yoga, must be a very profound wisdom, more profound than any other teaching, he says. Reflect upon it daily and then act as you choose. This secret is never to be spoken to those who are devoid of austerities, nor those who are not devoted, nor those who do not render service, or who speak ill of me. And those who study this great secret of the fourfold yoga, they rightly and duly perform the sacrifice of knowledge to me. He calls the sacrifice of knowledge the highest of all sacrifices. All yagyas lie there. So you get this dharma and you pass it on to others, as was told by his predecessor, which is previous incarnation, Sri Ramchandra, when he also stood up for that idea about devotion to the Lord through sacrifice, the sacrifice of knowledge. So that was a quick study, and right there in the Gita, it's not in one chapter and in a few sets of slokas. If you look around the Gita, it's all there in the chapters, the 18 chapters. At the end, you'll find a place where he's talking specifically about Chaturdasha Yoga. And the only real difference I can see in his version of the 4 yogas and Vivekananda's new religion type is that Buddhi Yoga became Jnana Yoga here. And to me, it's a small distinction. They really mean pretty much the same thing. It's the yoga of your intellect, Buddhi Yoga. And that's what's causing you the problem that Jnana Yoga will remove for you when you clarify your mind and your thinking process. So that's why they sing so lovingly to Sri Krishna about that. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnana Jana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapada Kamala Shri Guru Shri Guru Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha. Beautiful verse of these 5 verses here from the Vaishnava tradition, the adorable and ever pure one. Vandeham, I worship Vandani or Vandanam. And the English would run something like, praises to you, my Lord, eternal praises, never-ending praises to you, O adorable one. Thou who takest the devotees from earth to the highest realm of existence. You have opened my eyes, unmilitam yenam. Chakshur unmilitam. Chakshur means to see. You have opened my eyes, given me insight, and cleared my perception of doubts and imperfections. What's it sound like? That Buddhi Yoga or Jnana Yoga with discrimination. Therefore to thee, O beloved one, I offer all that I am. That sounds like Karma Yoga. He's offering everything. Even the wisdom he got, even the discrimination that he was given from the Guru, you see, he's offering back to the Lord. So you could say that's this perfect fusing of Jnana and Karma, wisdom and action. So, and then of course the chorus is, O gracious Guru of the gods, whose incomparable feet even Mother Kamala takes her refuge in. That's Divine Mother as Lakshmi. everlasting prostrations offered in thine presence, O teacher, thou who art the path, the goal, and the savior of all living beings. Now this is fully matured bhakti. So you've got Jnanam, talked about there with the third eye opening, offering, which is Yagya of Karma Yoga, and the very ultimate level of bhakti, all in one verse, really, one song. So if you are going to express the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita, as we just looked at some of these points about Chaturdasha Yoga, you would do it like that. And there would be no masking any of those four yogas when you do so. They'd all be prevalent and prominent. Now, if we segue quickly over to your right there to look at Swami Vivekananda's fully fleshed out version of Chaturdasha Yoga, the new religion of the age. He's telling us to practice this way. Vedanta is a very high philosophy whose main components linger in the non-dual. It's hard to bring Vedanta down to lower than the non-dual, and when it does, it becomes qualified non-dualism, which is what we're doing right now. We're sitting in a field of wisdom. We're actually sitting in a field of our own wisdom and remembering it. And they're helping us to remember it because they're fully remembered already. They came to earth with it and gave it in the form of songs and scriptures and discourses and so forth. So these four yogas defined, you can see these two latest pictures of Swami Vivekananda that were found recently, some 10, 20 years ago in an attic in America, I think, someone's house, were brought out and exposed. We were very happy to see that collection along with several dozen others that we had of him when he was in the body. So we have this fully illumined yogi whom I like to call the patron saint of America because we don't really have one. And so we look to this coming of Swami Vivekananda in 1893 at the Parliament of Religions as being that important. He got here long before some of these opportunistic gurus came who were really looking to make a profit out of religion or spiritual materialism, as it was called later on in the 60s by some of the teachers here. And they were seeing through it. But long before that, thankfully, Divine Mother had put him on the scene. And he was on the scene, it was said, when the first World's Fair was going on, I guess up in Canada or something. And then also, he was on the scene there with people getting interested in seances in the living room to try and contact their dead ancestors. That was going on. That was really the kind of occult spirituality that the West, the intellectual West, was beginning to become interested in, if they weren't just outright interested in science, like Nikola Tesla and others whom he met. But the other thing that was going on, religiously speaking, was this big tent revival, where you'd get together and dance and sing in tents, hallelujah style. And he had seen that in India too. It was a kind of surface bhakti that was going on where all of a sudden you're all holy and dancing around and in a high mood, but then you haven't done any practice, like say of the other three yogas, to keep that mood high. So as soon as you stop dancing and singing and leave the tent, then your energy, which they would call in India Kundalini Shakti, plummeted back down to the lower centers, and you were just the same old Joe again, maybe worse, because it would bring down a lot of these low base desires with it. These practices are designed to purify the centers so that when energy does come up through practices like authentic bhakti, they will stay up, you see. You won't just leave the tent or leave the kirtan or whatever and just return to your old self again because you just sang to the Lord. You love the Lord, and you leave the arena of that feeling elevated, and the elevated feeling lasts forever. It's like a samadhi. Bhakti too has kinds of samadhis to it. They're called bhavas. And there are certain moods that you hold in order to keep them up, like the mood of I'm a friend of God, or God is my father or mother, or God is my son or daughter, or God is my guru, my teacher, or God is my beloved. See, God is the very feeling of peace within me. These are called 5 dasya bhavas, or moods. And we just sang Vandeham, which is from the Vaishnava tradition, who are so well known for bhakti in India. So you might as well put those 5 in with them. It's another pancha system that I go on and on about, how many sets of 5s there are, just like the 5 fingers on your hand. And the 5 toes on the Guru's feet, both of them. So you've got these very profound significances to that particular number. I used to say you should transcend the 2s by using the 3s and the 5s, you see. So these numbered systems have a very spiritual connotation to them. Now, I mentioned Swami Vivekananda's 2 recent pictures when he was there in America, and then I called the subtitle this chart, The 4 Yogas Defined. You could see there they are, Bhakti, Jnanam, Raja, and Karma. Probably, for those who are aware of the 4 yogas, you'd have to define Raja for them. Sometimes we just call that Dhyan yoga, too, or because it's a yoga of meditation leading to samadhi. So the father of yoga, who was really the authentic teacher of authentic yoga, had an 8-limb system in which he outlined that would lead you where? From basic practices like the yamas and niyamas, non-violence, truthfulness, not coveting the goods of other beings and other countries, we might add, and and studying of scriptures, swadhyaya, remembering and memorizing them, doing austerities every day to make yourself strong, not weak, and worshiping the Lord, Ishvara Pranidhana, and trying to attain purity of mind, socha, and on and on. They have these 2 limbs, or 10 things really. And that leads you to be able to sit without moving. 1 position is advised, ekasana, and then that leads you to be able to breathe properly. And then that balancing of breath leads you to the possibility of calming your mind, pratyahara. If you can calm the mind, you get concentration, game over. If you've reached the 6th limb authentically and can stay there, it's just like opening the heart chakra. You'll never fall to the lower chakras again. In yoga, if you reach concentration, called dharana, the game is over. All those things you just practiced become like notes in a scale to a musician. You still know them, but they're a part of the music. You don't think about them. You don't have to think about them anymore. And of course, unless you have to teach them to an errant society or evil children or deluded ancestors, which happens a lot in this particular day and time. So you're already poised in concentration. Then it's only a matter of 2 steps. Meditation comes after concentration, that's dharana, and then you get samadhi. Now, these words are not in our tradition, you see, and there's no way of really defining them. You kind of have to practice them, and just like you would listen to a sheikh or a sheikha in Muslim religion to get to the paradise of Islam, you'd have to listen to teachings of the Dharma from a guru, a preceptor, in order to get to concentration, meditation, and samadhi, and to understand them. So those 3 upper limbs, if you put them together, are called samyama. If you have ability to concentrate, to meditate, and to get into samadhi and fall back from it at will, then you have the power of samyama, which you can place on anything and know it. Like something like looking into the past and seeing history would be marvelous to a clairvoyant. To the yogi, it would just be ho-hum, you see, because he already knows that the past, present, and future are illusory. So why is he going to look into them for any kind of additional clarity or any kind of higher wisdom? Higher wisdom is all stable, stationary, beyond time, beyond space, outside of the realm of name and form. It's to be meditated upon. It's the 7th yoga. So you're going 6, 7, 8, 6, 7, 8 all the time. It's like going heart, throat, third eye, crown, third eye, throat. if you use it in Kundalini speak. Well, I told you, I don't know why I jumped to Raja Yoga right away. It's just because if you do know anything about yoga, especially integral synthesis of yoga, you've heard of karma, you've heard of bhakti, and you've heard of jnana, most likely. But Raja Yoga might throw you a little curve. And what is that? Well, that's hatha, right? I mean, people might actually think that wrongly. Yoga has been a word that's sort of been co-opted and put on a physical level only. Very unfortunate, very misleading, and really robbing you of this richness of 7 other limbs, which is true authentic yoga, which the father of yoga himself composed and put together around 140 years after Jesus was on earth. So in India this was. So while Christianity was still creeping along toward the Crusades, you've got these great seers like Patanjali putting out this 8-limbed yoga system for people in India to further refine their understanding of their intellect, the love of their heart, the concentration of their mind into samadhi, and the way to worship people through work. All those things were being put forth by great seers like that, and corroborating with one another and correlating it all to a long past of Dharma, all the way back to, say, Lord Vashishta or Sri Ram, who was before Krishna. So I started out explaining Raja Yoga then as the yoga of meditation and samadhi. He says here in the Gita, dwell in solitude, restrain the senses, control the mind, and engage in meditation. You will thus reach perfection in Brahman. Sounds like a good yoga too. So I would say possibly that you could ignore the other 3 yogas and just practice that one. That's got everything you want in it. I have never found a system in all the religions I've studied, including all the darshanas of India, as complex and complete as Raja Yoga. The only one to compete with it would be Tantra, and that was never systematized. Too ancient, too vast, too many rites, too many rituals, and a very long time for it to unfold with nobody there to pull it all together into one darshana. So it was never listed as an Indian darshana. I had a funny thought yesterday, actually. If we looked at America in a completely non-judgmental way and said, what philosophy of India is America really practicing unknowingly? Somebody said Charvaka. That's an answer too. Other than that one, that's materialism in India. They do have that one philosophy that they allow, that one seer, so to speak, gave his idea out about materialism. But of all the other darshanas, you couldn't say America was practicing Vedic. You couldn't say that they were practicing yogic. You'd have to say they're practicing Tantra. They're interested in sexuality. They're interested in intoxication with substances. They're interested in rituals of an outer kind, you see, and so forth. So that's why some thinkers I've known in my own life have said, we should take, just like this talk, we should take karma yoga and make it karma as yoga. You could say then we should probably take this westernized version of Tantra we're all practicing, people out there are practicing in neighborhoods, and make it real Tantra, you see. Start to do all your sexual relations consciously for a higher end. If you take intoxicants, make sure to offer them to the Lord so that you'll outgrow the desire for their limitations. And raise your family up and deify objects, like Tantrists do. They look at objects and say, manifestation of Brahman, deification of that. Make sure I bless my food and so forth. Raise my ojas up and so forth. Tantra also includes Kundalini system, and along with some Vedic in it. So not a sidetrack at all, really. It's really more to the point about this powerful teaching of Raja Yoga that can stand on its own and is very complete. Won't be probably a year or two we'll have a full book out about that in SRV, because I gave some 108 lessons, maybe more. I remember reaching the 108th because it was a auspicious number in our tradition, to a cross-section of Westerners, maybe 50 to 100 of them, who were participating off and on over a period of some 12 years or more. And it was all recorded in lessons sent out to them. We're thinking, and all the questions that they asked were answered and came back in the lessons. So we'll put a book out like this soon about that in SRV, sort of like an experiment of how Raja Yoga was seen, practiced, and realized to whatever, or not, to whatever degree, in this cross-section of people that came forward to participate in this experiment of Raja Yoga in the West. So basically, all that is put in that quote by Sri Krishna. Solitude would be something you would seek for a while. You'd restrain your 5 senses, control the mind, engage in meditation. You can see how Raja Yoga is the yoga of meditation then. And then reach perfection in Brahman. That's pretty much covered. I'm not going to go through all the bullet points. If I read the quotes of each one of these, it'll pretty much summate what's in these boxes you're looking at. So let's leave karma yoga for the end and look at bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion to God. He says, Krishna again, supreme-minded, beyond both grief and desire, same-sided, and kind to all beings, such a one attains supreme devotion to me. According to Sri Ram in his 9 limbs of bhakti, he says, listen to accounts of God's deeds. It's a kind of act, isn't it? Engage sincerely in rituals, pujas, so forth, and singing and dancing. Purify your heart and mind via daily worship. Sing praises to the Lord and Mother. Get initiation into the spiritual path. Perform japa of the holy names. That's with a mantra you get. Engage earnestly in meditative prayer. Increase devotion to God with form, your ideal, Ishvara, which would be Krishna to the Vaishnavas, Shiva to the Shaivites, Divine Mother to the Shaktas, and so forth, each with their own place and their own ideal, all merged in this idea of bhakti yoga. Across the way, as we go through this again fairly quickly, you have the yoga of Jnanam, the yoga of discerning wisdom. Quote from Krishna, he whose intellect is unattached everywhere, who is endowed with non-dual understanding, that one reaches consummate knowledge. For that you're going to want to recite the slokas of the scriptures. I could go around with all the people in the room here, and they could each recite their favorite slokas out of scriptures that they've been encouraged to memorize. Some would know scriptures out of Shankara's Vivekananda, other would know slokas out of the Gita, others would know the peace chants out of the Upanishads, some would know slokas from the Yoga Sutras. We know them all in an admixture, and a lot of them relating the truths of these 4 yogas as we chant them. So reciting the slokas of the scriptures is called svadhyaya. Memorize the slokas. Take teachings from an illumined teacher. Comprehend the meaning of the scriptures. Make sure then you discriminate between what is real and what is unreal. That is, the world and Brahman. And penetrate through all cosmic appearances. You must see through the subterfuge of Maya, through the levels to the real essence of a thing. Like there's a tree, and then there's the atomic particle tree, and then there's the essence tree. So you have to go through the two that materialists love and scientists love to those which the seers know. See, else you'll get stuck on outer appearances. To know the essence of anything is important. Like with words, you'd have to take a word like svadhyaya or dhyan yoga, and you'd have to go to the real deep meaning of it and flesh it out like this. Then contemplate it for a while and let it become a part of your thinking mind, the way that nutrients from food become a part of your body when you eat and digest it. It'll return you to your natural state of awareness when you do this. Contemplate the nature of reality once you see it after you've penetrated through appearances. And then abide continually in non-dual realization. You see, very beautiful rendering of the points of Jnana Yoga. And then we come to it, the Karma Yoga bullet points. And I ask you to go back and look at both charts now we've been talking about, and in the way of Chaturjasya Yoga or integral yoga, think that if I were to turn all my work today into all karma into Karma Yoga, that I wouldn't be losing any energy thereby. I'm working anyway, so why don't I just do it with this new attitude, with this 2% shift of consciousness. I'm doing it anyway. And actually, when I do it anyway, unconsciously, it's bringing me a lot of grief sometimes. It's bringing me a lot of unrest. Or the watchword nowadays is stress, you see. So if that's the case with work, that sometimes it brings me satisfaction and many other times dissatisfaction. Sometimes it leaves me feeling good about myself, which is an ego self usually. Other times it makes me feel very, very lacking, because I failed. So success and failure all mixed up. If that's the case with the work I do, then why don't I listen to the illumined souls and try and turn this all into conscious action? And even if it fails and succeeds and fails and succeeds, you have a new mind around it. So the new mind is telling you that's not my fault that it failed, and it's not to my credit if it succeeded. Sound good? No, it doesn't, does it? It doesn't sound good to most people. You have to actually experience that kind of detachment. That it's neither my fault nor is it my credit. That's neutral, you see. Because if you do feel the credit for it, then doesn't that lead you to more desire for success, which then leads to more failure? So you always fall into this loop of dualities. You don't know it because of the time that passes. You can coast on something, some good success you've had for a long time, until the money from it goes away, or it turns into something that's unpopular, like from Newtonian into Einsteinian. How did poor Newton feel, you see, when he coasted for so many centuries and then it was uprooted, outstaged, you see, by Einstein. So I mean, no matter how long you're cruising on any kind of realization or insight you've had in in vikarma, then you turn it into akarma and you see the benefits of it immediately. You're the witness. You're beginning to master Raja Yoga because you can now meditate on it without obstacles. So that's why Krishna says here, perform actions selflessly and continually while taking refuge in me. By my grace, that one reaches the eternal, undecaying abode. We had the same quote here, up here, you see. So since we're really concentrating on karma yoga as karma, or karma as karma yoga, let's see what we'll need to do. We'll need to engage only in obligatory actions. Sometimes that's called scripturally ordained actions, which really probably means don't do any actions that aren't scripturally ordained, to put a finer point on it. Because if you're not living in the Dharma, you have that word righteousness, then you have this fear of unrighteousness. So you're always doing an action and you've got a fear or a doubt attached to it. You have a fear or a doubt of whether it's going to be accepted by others, therefore succeed, or whether it's going to be not accepted or seen improperly. And that causes you fear and doubt. And so that fear and doubt is mixed into everything that you do that is self-oriented, that is ego-oriented. So this yoga of transcendence that you're going to practice is going to be helped mightily by the yoga of inaction, meditation. We'll look at that chart next. So enter only into obligatory actions. Someone wrote me the other day saying that Ramakrishna said in the gospel, you need to hold on to God with one hand, as I was saying, hold on to the world with the other until you can hold on to God with both hands. See, at that time, the Lord will remove all this idea of action from your mind. Sounds like karma yoga to me has become fructified. But what was the thing that you should not do in the meantime? Increase your actions. Take on too many. Become too busy. You see, busy bee. That is what Sri Ramakrishna advised not to do. Just take on the obligatory actions that should be done, to maintain your livelihood, your family, dharmically, and thereby reduce that stress, reduce that guilt, that guilty feeling, that feeling of being unsettled that I talked about yesterday with one of the devotees. That unsettling feeling that you always are carrying around with you, whether your life is going well or not, it's still in the background. There's a way of neutralizing that completely and being free of that kind of weight. Well, you're definitely going to have to renounce action done for selfish motives. We said that. I think I explained that as clearly as I could at the outset of the class. You don't want to offer these things to the ego, who will take them in various ways. The teaching of Sri Ramakrishna is that you should ripen the ego before you would do anything like that. The ego can partake of everything if it's ripe and not spoil it. But if it's unripe, it will spoil it every time. If there is any devil in existence, talking about eternal hellfires and all that being a dream, if there is any devil, it's the unripe ego in our tradition. Perform all action with evenness of mind. For wretched are the result seekers. That comes to our mind automatically if we are Gita lovers. But what also comes to my mind when I read that is that if you perform action in rajas, restlessness, or if you perform action in tamas, slothfulness, that's where the karma is accruing all the time and coming back at you when you least expect it quite often. Or you constantly have to, as they say nowadays, put out fires. You're trying to get to other things that are more important, and all this kriyamani karma is coming up and getting in your way. So you can never get to the actual accomplishment that you're after. And that's also going to play into this idea of failure, not succeeding over time, and just hanging out in the periphery of success and never gaining true success. So all of this is plaguing the mind as it goes along. So you're going to want to do all actions in what, then, if you're not going to do it restlessness, or you're not going to do it slothfulness? In balance, which is called sattva guna. So you should make it a practice in karma yoga then, before you go out the door, Swami Vivekananda told us, to settle your mind. That would be if you practice meditation in the morning, that would probably be the rudder of your boat. I know people, Buddhists, Vedantists, and others, Sufis, who make sure that they do their morning meditation, and then the day goes fine. Even if it's a bad day, the negativity is much offset by the fact that I started it all out with meditation on the Lord, or meditation on the light, if you're a lover of formlessness, or meditation on the Word, if you're a mystic, you see. Whatever it is that your temperament is, and whichever yoga you select to be the one that stands out front of the other three, and then eventually incorporates them all, that's going to be enjoined upon you to practice that each day. So that's a very powerful bullet point. Do not seek the fruits of action. That's a hand slapper, you see. Like the kid wants to reach out for that quarter he just got for washing your car or something, you see. And the whole reason he did the car wash was to get that quarter so he could go down and get some ice cream or see a movie or something. And so the whole thing is about fruits, as we're raised, especially in this materialistic country. So whereas the parent will teach them, maybe the hard lesson is, I'm sorry, you're not going to get a quarter for that. Well, then you're a liar. So that's not going to be a very good example. Although probably to teach a lesson, it could be it could be done, but basically you're going to have to teach the kid how to work for a higher purpose than satisfaction of the senses. Won't you do it for me, son, or my dear daughter? Maybe not even offer money in the first place as a motivation, or toys, or whatever they're after. Say, you should be doing this, like the good Hindu child, as I've seen in India in the past. You should be doing this just to please the Lord. For right now, if the father and mother takes the place of the Lord, because that's as deep as you can understand, that's going to be a good thing. Because they're your first guru, they say. Father and mother, your first gurus in India. So this is the idea, is to be able to do it for the satisfaction of pleasing the Lord, in whatever way you see the Lord. So then you'll be raised not seeking the fruits of action for their own sake, or for your own pleasure, the sake of your ego. A lot of us in the West is why we can't jump to karma yoga, or karma as yoga, because we have a habit of that kind of seeking. You see, it's become a habit, so we have to go back and erase the habit. And that might be, for some of us, like the businessmen, very hard to do. I've talked to swamis who said, I talked to the businessmen about karma yoga, they're not buying it. See, the American businessmen, they cannot see for the life of them why they should do that. Objects are very important to them. Their desires being satisfied, very important for them. Their pleasures being enjoyed, very important to them. These things have taken the forefront of everything. And the idea of pleasing the Lord, or not pleasing the ego, has disappeared. If it was ever there in European civilization to begin with. Detached from the outcomes of all action is the next bullet point. That's just practical. If you attach to the outcomes of action, then you're going to be unhappy when it doesn't go right for you, and happy when it does. And we'll get to that after the break. Acts of good stupefaction and acts of bad stupefaction are two of these acts that Lord Copula taught us way back in the early days of Indian Dharma. That's a nice phrase, acts of good stupefaction. So there are people out there who are doing actions that turn out good, that turn evil later, you see, or that please them at the time and then they become bored with later, or they feel like it was right at the time and then they see the flaws in it later, you see. So time is one of the factors in enlightenment. Time is one of the main factors in gaining enlightenment here, Shisharda Devi told us. Well, here it really gets a little bit more convincing when you say, perform all work as worship. That's how Swamiji got through to people, maybe even American businessmen, or definitely English businessmen, by telling them, labor as love, work as worship, without a lot of philosophical jargon or a lot of deep cosmological explanations or emotional problems that are in the way of the Westerners and the religionists. Just put it that simply to them, and then be the example for it. And this is how Swami Vivekananda accomplished the most amazing feat in the history of mankind. One of two. That is that he actually convinced thousands of Hindu men and some Hindu women to give up the world when they were young. It just doesn't happen. The last person who did anything like that was Lord Buddha, when he convinced the world to try and become nonviolent, to quit hurting and sacrificing animals, maybe even to quit eating meat and so forth. And like his Jain ancestors, you might say, proposed a philosophy of complete nonviolence that spread across the world, all the way to Japan, 52 generations later as Zen. So India was out and about because of Lord Buddha, and that wasn't Buddhism that was doing that. There was no Christianity when Christ lived, no Buddhism when Buddha lived. This was a great feat accomplished by the Lord inside of the personages of Lord Buddha and Swami Vivekananda, which is why we really see them as one thing, one person, one being that we can offer to, God with form. So, perform all work as worship. Utilize all work to serve God and mankind. If you want it put even clearer, and work meticulously, but with detachment. That's one of my favorites too. That you shouldn't do slovenly work just because work, has no wherewithal or meaning in the end. If it doesn't lead to knowledge, or it's all futile, or it brings me a mixture of pleasure and pain. You could, if your understanding wasn't really mature, you could use that to renounce action done for unselfish motive. You see, you would have a kind of half realization of that. You withdraw from the arena of work and you become a lazy person, see, for the wrong reasons. And that happens to monks too, they say. So, even if a work goes wrong in the middle of the path of work, you're supposed to accomplish it with detachment. See how all of these really connect together. If you took these, meditated on each one of these bullet points under the heading of karma as yoga, then you would see how all of this is interconnected in one great yoga called the yoga of action. So these are quotes from Sri Krishna, and before we take our break, we could put it musically again. So we end on that sweet note, which he is so famous for. Govindam Madipurusha Dhammaham bhajami. Govindam Madipurusha Dhammaham bhajami. Govindam Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Vangayati Girim Yat Kripatam Maham Vande Paramananda Madhavam. Govindam, Govindam Haripurusham Dhammaham bhajami. Govindam Haripurusham Dhammaham bhajami. Govindam Haripurusham Dhammaham bhajami. So here we will take our 15-minute break and come back with 2 new charts on the teachings of karma yoga or karma as yoga.